Hey guys, welcome to Break It Yourself. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Harbor Freight Dovetail Jig. Originally, I was looking at the Porter Cable dovetail jig, and it was over $100, and that got me thinking maybe Harbor Freight had something. So I ended up looking it up. They have this $35 option right now. I think I used, one of those promo codes that they text out weekly. Speak of the devil, just got my weekend Harbor Freight Tools 3-day sale, 20% off one item. There you go. You can get 20% off this dovetail jig. Ended up getting it for less than that. But for $35, even for $35, I was willing to take the risk to test it out. I've done 9 drawer boxes so far. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you that I think that it's absolutely worth it. As long as you put the time in to set it up properly and you're not going for absolute perfection. I mean, I got pretty good results, or what I would think would be pretty good results. I was definitely happy with the results that it gave me. Most of the issues that I had were actually because I was using wood that wasn't perfectly straight, might have been cupped a little bit, which caused a little bit of issues. But if you got totally straight boards and you set this thing up right, it'll give you very good half-inch, half-blind dovetails. So let's get into the actual setup and some of the things. The first thing that you're absolutely gonna have to do is, so it has these handles that clamp your workpieces in place. This one, the bottom one, is set up properly, and that to clamp you push down so it gets out of the way of the router. This top one on mine came improperly, and that to clamp it you had to pull it down, which would get in the way of your router. So I unscrewed both sides, turned it 180 degrees, and so now I push down in a way to lock the workpiece in place. The user's manual that comes with this jig is horrible. There's another one online that's much better. It's the identical jig, but it's just much more in depth. I'll be using this Kreg jig tool to kind of set, a measurement like 1/8 of an inch, tighten that down, and then use that. You can also use a combination square I've also used on this jig. Very, very helpful. So just throwing that out there. I'll link both down below if you don't have one of those. The first thing we're gonna do, so after we swapped this piece, turned it 180 degrees so that it now clamps in the proper direction, we're gonna take our piece, our work piece, we're gonna slide it in here. And then what you want to do is, when you're setting this up, these little fingers right here, you want to set your workpiece so that it is equal distant on both sides. So loosen up all these little guides so that they move freely. That way, so you have them all loose. You can set this and make sure that you've got proper distance that you want. And then I have this little guide right here. I tightened him down because I know it's equal distance on this side and on this side. So that was the first thing that I set. Then, since this is a 1/2 inch jig, I came over 1/2 inch from this edge of this piece of wood, and then I had my other workpiece that I slid in to set this guide right here. I had my other workpiece here. We'll go ahead and slide it in. And I came over 1/2 inch and set this guide right here. So that's how I started out. I set this guide and this guide, got them set, offset my bottom piece by 1/2 inch, made sure that that was good. One of the things that you're gonna wanna do is that these fingers should be 1/8 of an inch from the edge of your bottom workpiece. So I'll set 1/8 of an inch on here. And then what you can do is you can loosen up this knob and this knob to get that 1/8 of an inch set right. So loosen those up. Make sure you've got an 1/8 of an inch. I actually had a little bit of trouble with mine when I would tighten down and loosen up. See how that moves like that? So it moves ever so slightly. So what I would have to do is I would have to hold this here while tightening down. I did not see other people online have that issue. Maybe it's just mine, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Just one added step. When I would add a new workpiece in, and now it's ready to clamp it down, I would have to hold this here, get it set, clamp it down to make sure that this was exactly an 1/8 of an inch. So once you have this guide set to an 1/8 of an inch, that's good. Then what you're gonna do is on your actual router itself, you're gonna measure from the guide that you've put in, that's gonna go along this guide as well. You're gonna measure out to the edge of your router, and then using the other user's manual that I found, which I will link below, they have a chart set up. So they say X distance will equal the distance back that this fence needs to be. That was really, really handy. So I just took my router, I measured my router from the guide bushing to the edge of the router, and then that on a chart gave me the distance that my fence needed to be. That was really nice and handy, and it'll get you really close. I then had to, adjust the fence slightly, and unfortunately my fence bows ever so slightly. Hopefully yours is perfectly straight. So that added some other complexity that I was able to overcome. But use the chart to get your fence set. Then what I would do is whatever the chart called out, let's say it was like 3 3/4, you put in your distance from the edge of the bushing to the edge of the router base. The thickness of your workpiece is at the top, and then you go down and it gives you a distance that your fence needs to be set at. It was very handy. It's not in the Harbor Freight user manual, but I will link this user manual that's identical. So if your fit is too small, then you need to raise your router bit slightly, and if they're too big, then you need to lower your router bit slightly. The depth that it says to set your router bit at is 9/16 of an inch. I was able to set mine at 9/16 of an inch, and it worked perfectly, and I didn't have to adjust from there. But if you do have to adjust, it's no big deal. Just make really, really small changes. One other drawback of my jig is that this end, for some reason, is kind of bent upwards. That might be something that I've done. I've had this thing for quite a while, and it's just kind of been thrown around. So what I would also do, this was an added step each time that added time, but I would put a little clamp right here just to pull this down, because if it floated up, I wouldn't get the proper depth. Puppies are playing right now. Hope this video was helpful for you if you're trying to decide if you want to get the Harbor Freight Dovetail jig or not. I definitely recommend it for the price, especially if you get a coupon code. Just take a chance on it. I've had really good success with it. Thanks for watching Break It Yourself. Don't forget to thumbs me up, and we'll see you next time. Shelly. Hey, Roo.